Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be talking about a deck that was, well, it was really good for a really long time. And as the title and thumbnail said, this was the best deck in format for like 5 years. You can argue other decks were the best deck, and you'll definitely hear people say that it was other decks, but most people would say it's this deck, and it was very good. And some of you may have never heard of this deck, although it was, well, it's arguably still the best deck in format, but arguably the format doesn't really exist anymore. And that format is the theme deck format. Theme deck is probably the second most important Pokemon TCG format, although you can make an argument it's the most, or you can make an argument it's the third. Of course, Standard is a very important Pokemon format, and right now it's really the main format. And I mean, for essentially forever, it's been, or since the creation of Pokemon TCG, Standard's been the main format, but then the Unlimited format is played probably more than the Standard format just by average players, and then the theme deck's played by people who are learning the game at first, but then a lot of people continue to play the format. And theme deck format, if you don't know what it is, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's playing with theme decks, and there are a few reasons theme deck format doesn't exist, or has essentially died. One is that they stopped printing theme decks. So they printed, I'm actually going to go to the shop, and I can go here, and we can see, this is like really terrible to go through. So there's League Battle decks. These are pretty good. I actually don't even know what's in these decks, to be honest. But oh wow, this deck's pretty solid. And so you got League Battle decks, and um, you got EX Deluxe Battle decks or EX Battle decks, and those are, well, they're decks, but they're not really theme decks. Um, oh yeah, here's another League Battle deck. And so there are decks. Oh, here's another battle. Here's a regular EX battle deck, which features, well, an EX, and it's similar to theme decks. They're actually pretty similar, but they're not called theme decks. And then let's see if we can scroll down. This is so slow. Scroll down here to find ourselves a theme deck. So these are some of the more recent theme decks in 2020, I guess was the last year that they're printed in. Probably November. I don't know. I didn't buy them physically. Oh, I guess it was earlier. So every main set release, there'd be a theme deck, and oh, maybe they're not in the shops. Okay, looks like theme decks are not in the shops. I thought they were. So live, you can't play theme decks in live, and in like stand. There's no theme deck format in live at all. So, but instead we got expanded beta, and so I guess you could play this deck in expanded beta. It's not super good though. But I guess if you're a new player, it's not terrible. And I will have the list down below in the description if you want to copy it. I believe this is the correct 60. I copied it from a website. Well, I went to like Bulbapedia and just copied the cards down. But the deck plays 20 energies. So let's start with the energies. It runs 11 lightning, 9 water. That's a lot of energy. So yeah, you had inconsistencies, but this is pretty average for theme decks. I guess it was a little higher than normal theme deck, or the good theme decks. The good theme decks had, I think it was like 18 to 20. So, 20 is a little on the higher end, but also this deck does use a bunch of energy. And honestly, I don't know if I've ever ran out of energy, but I've come close. And certainly having higher energy counts is nice, so you can hopefully always have it when you need it. That is because the main Pokemon in the deck is the Pokemon on the front of the box, which is Dragonite. Dragonite has its ability Hurricane Charge, and this ability we actually have in the current standard format. And this is really one of the best, if not the best, Pokemon in themed. I don't think it's the best, but it's pretty good. And Dragonite is like Hurricane Charge is super good. It says once during a turn, you may attach a Water Energy card, a Lightning Energy card, or one of each from your hand to your Pokemon in any way you like, so you can split them up. And this is nice. 2 extra energy every turn plus an attachment. That's 3 energy every single turn. And you have Dragon Impact, Water, Lightning, Colorless. Colorless does 170, which is enough to one-shot most Pokemon. It won't be one-shotting Rillaboom, which was pretty popular in the format, or there's a Corviknight with an attack that makes it take less damage. I feel like there are some 180 HP Pokemon, but I don't really remember them, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know if there were any, but then there's a Suion Samurai. There are a few, but sorry, regular Samurai. But this one shots pretty much everything. It'll one shot Dragonite. It'll one shot either the Charizards. It'll one shot Empoleon. It'll one shot they're pretty much everything, right? So, and if you want me to go more into more detail on other theme decks, comment that down below, like the video, and if this video does well, I'll probably cover other theme decks. Because theme decks were really cool. I'm very sad that they have gone away. I mean, I'm just sad that there's really only one format in live, one fully developed format in live. There's expanded beta, which is okay. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's a little it's missing some features. But Dragonite here also discards 3 energy with your attack, but you can accelerate through more energy. So you can technically accelerate as much energy as you discard every turn. This is nice. You can stream Dragon Impact. However, this is a bit of an issue because you're discarding 3 energy every turn. This is why I said that deck wants so much energy. But if you use this every single turn, you might run out. And you need 3 energy in your hand, which is, well, that's a lot. Also, you have 160 HP, which is pretty high, meaning you can tank hits. You're not getting one-shotted that commonly. A lot of decks have the ability to one-shot you at some point in the game, but it's later on. If you take a look at, say, Unseen Depths, which was the deck, my favorite deck, and probably the deck I play the most, that deck could not one-shot Dragonite. It just couldn't ever. So, there are decks you can just always survive a hit from. And with theme decks, there's a lot of complexity. I think a lot of people or a lot of people back then who played just standard thought that theme decks were really simple, but there is a lot of nuance in knowing matchups and the damage numbers in matchups because every deck had numerous different attack rates, as this deck has. There's also the Dragonair, which has Destructive Whirlpool, which it's 70 for 4, discard energy attached to your opponent's active. Oh, also Dragonites, you can use multiple Dragonites in one turn, but that's just super rare, and you probably don't need to, but Dragonair you could attack with it to 70, and then you discard an energy. It's not terrible if you're able to power it up, but I don't know if I've really ever attacked with this. It's funny, but it's kind of niche. And Dratini is kind of interesting if it has any water energy attached. It's free retreat, so it's like kind of a pivot. It's useful in certain scenarios. It's certainly not a bad ability to have. Your attack, it's not good. Dragonair, I will say, Tail Lap, 20 for 1. It's not that good. It's not particularly good, but there are definitely times when you'll use it, and it can set up numbers. I mean, you can just Tail Lap like 3 or 4 turns in a row if your opponent has a bad start or you have a bad start, or really some combination of the two, and it can be good enough, and it can set up math, specifically with the arguably the best attacker in the deck. I don't think this is the best attacker in the deck, but I know some people who love this attacker. That's Tornadus, colorless, which is pretty cool. Also, in terms of weaknesses, Dragonite's weakness to Fairy meant that it essentially didn't have a weakness because there were almost no Fairy Pokemon in the format or good Fairy decks. But then there weren't any good Fairy decks. I'll say that. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. But Tornadus here is weak to lightning but resists fighting versus Thundurus and a number of other Pokemon which are weak to fighting, but they resist metal, which is pretty cool. And this Pokemon resists psychic. I miss the days when they're excuse me, sorry, I am tired. I miss the days when there were a lot of different resistances. Currently in standard, there are no Pokemon that resist psychic or metal. There's resistance to fighting and grass, and I believe that's it. But anyways, resisting fighting -20 is nice against certain fighting decks. I mean, against Towering Heights, which was the main fighting deck, meaning that matchup was really interesting. But you got Knuckle Punch, whatever, 20 for 1. Not terrible, honestly. You definitely use it, but it's not that good. Thundurus Tornado, though, here, 80 for 3 colorless, which is okay. I mean, it's pretty solid, but not amazing. But then, if Thundurus is on your bench, which you have 2 copies of, it does 20 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and that's pretty good. Essentially, no decks in the format had bench protection outside of the aforementioned Towering Heights, which meant that Tornadus wasn't a perfect attacker there, but taking resistance or having resistance, taking less damage meant that it was a solid attacker. But it wasn't, it wasn't actually making full use of its potential as a bench attacker. 20 bench damage is not a ton, so you need to keep track of this. And 80 damage to the active also isn't a ton, so you want to be as careful as you can to make sure that you are getting like knockouts with this and building up to future turns. There are times when this would be able to win you the games. So we have Thundurus here, which does 120, Lanturn does 140, and for example, Dragonite has 160. So if you soften up once or twice doing 20 damage to it, then you can one-shot them, essentially, not technically one-shotting them, but do the bulk of the damage with one attack using Lanturn or Thundurus. Speaking of Thundurus was so good. This, in my opinion, was the best attacker in the deck. You got Thundurus Gale for 2 colorless, it does 20, but if Tornadus is on your bench, it does 70. That is amazing. 70 for 2 is really good. Allow you to apply a lot of early game pressure, just a turn before other attacks, and you can attach another energy for lightning colorless to do 120, but you do 40 damage to one of your own bench Pokemon. Luckily, dealing 40 damage to one of your own Pokemon oftentimes did not come into play. However, if your opponent was also using Soaring Storm or some other bench damage based deck, or partially bench damage based deck, you could go ahead and be very scared. You need to be very careful of where you're putting the damage with Thundurus and make sure it's okay. But for the most part, you could just put it on some of your support Pokemon, and the deck has really solid support Pokemon. We mentioned Dragonite, but there's some other really good stuff, or just a one-shot Pokemon that's probably going to get one-shotted back anyways, and it's not really a huge deal dealing 40 to yourself, to one of your own bench Pokemon, but it can become an issue later on. But Raging Thunder and Thundurus Gale are both insane attacks, making this attacker just really, really good. The fighting weakness was a little bit awkward sometimes, but instead, the fighting resistance with Tornadus is really nice. Also, we got ourselves Lanturn, which I mentioned earlier. Its energy grounding ability was really nice, and probably an ability I was never really able to fully utilize to the best of my ability. I played a lot of Theme, and I was pretty good at it, but I was not perfect by any means, and energy grounding is a really interesting ability. When one of your Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, you may move a basic energy from that Pokemon to this Pokemon, essentially preserving energy, kind of being like a form of energy acceleration. But it is lightning colorless, just like Thundurus, so you will need to probably get an extra energy on there some other way. You need to probably sit on the bench and let it soak up a bunch of energy from other Pokemon, or attach, or you can accelerate to it with Dragonite. In this attack says Lightning Strike 70 for the 3, but you can discard all lightning energy from this Pokemon, and then it does 140. This means a few things. One, you can't attack back-to-back turns with this Pokemon unless you are able to Dragonite, which was definitely an ability, or which its ability was definitely an option, something that you'd be able to do, and just a really, really solid option, but you only have 110 HP, you're hitting 140, so you will be taking knockouts, probably taking one-shots most of the time, but you will be vulnerable to getting one-shot yourself. 110 is not horrible, but you'll certainly be getting two-shotted, and it depends on your opponent's setup. This can be used to punish your opponent's setup, but really only if you get Dragonite, so it's more so a late game attacker. You either sit on the bench and wait for your Pokemon to get knocked out, or you go in with Dragonite and just start swinging. But getting a stage 2 and a stage 1 pretty awkward. And keep in mind, discarding the 2 lightnings means that you will have, if you have 3 lightnings on, you're discarding all the energy. That's pretty annoying. If you have lightning, water, you keep the water, you can attach another energy and retreat, or you can even have 2 waters on and then just retreat next turn. So there's a lot of different options with this. You can decide how early you want to go in with this Pokemon. And if you have a water, it will take you 2 turns to reattach to power up, but if it's lightning is what you have on, then you will need to manually attach 3 more times to get back up, which is awkward, so you need to be very careful of your energy situation with this Pokemon. Also, Chinchou, this Pokemon I think went a little under the radar. Spark, 10 for lightning colorless, does 10 to the active and 10 to your opponent's bench. This is some extra bench damage. It can come in nice and come in clutch at certain situations, but a lot of the time it is pretty underwhelming, but I do think it got overlooked a little bit because if you attack with this 2, 3, 4 times, then you're in a really good position, especially if your opponent is, if they have really tanky Pokemon that you need to soften up a little bit first. Spark can be an option. It's mostly an early game option if neither player is really fully set up, but it's not bad. But speaking of setting up, we got ourselves Alolan Grimer. Also, I don't know why Live has split up the evolution lines. It's kind of weird, but Alolan Grimer here says draw 2 cards for free. This is super interesting. 80 HP plus resistance to Psychic, but weakness to Fighting meant that it was decently tanky for a setup Pokemon. And then drawing 2 for free is great. You sit behind this until it gets knocked out and just set up your board state and your hand, and there's almost no disruption in the format, so you just keep building a bigger and bigger hand. That being said, you do have a 2 retreat in the list. In terms of switching, it runs 1 switch and it runs 1 Tate Liza. So Tate Liza is switch or shuffle draw 5, but you obviously can't change your deck in theme deck format, so only running 2 switch, it means that this Pokemon can get stuck in the active. You may need to manually retreat it, which is awkward. You can use Dragonite to pay the retreat cost, to accelerate and then pay the retreat cost. And you can also use Dragonite to Sludge Bomb. 30 for 3 is bad. It's really bad. But there are times when you kind of have to use it, and you'd rather Alolan Grimer get knocked out than pretty much anything else because all your other Pokemon are really useful. And being able to attack for free means you can go turn 1 going second, and you can get this onto your bench, potentially search it out with Pokemon Communication, 2 copies of that item search are in the deck, or Pokemon Fan Club, which can get Alolan Grimer. You can get this Pokemon onto your bench, and you can usually attach to your active and retreat. All your Pokemon are one retreat, basics are one retreat except for Alolan Grimer itself, which you want in the active, or Dratini. But I mentioned earlier the ability, if you attach a water, you can attach it, or if it has a water, then it has free retreat. So you can go and retreat into Alolan Grimer, which is really, really good. And then, you need to be careful of it getting stuck. That was definitely an issue, and potentially, if your opponent had a snipe-based deck, they could snipe around it. That was pretty rare, but that's why I like Unseen Depths, fun deck. And yeah, I might need to talk about that at some point in the future. But lastly, and probably most importantly for the Pokemon, with the Pidgey line, Pidgey, draw 1 for 1. It's okay. I mean, it's worse than the Alolan Grimer's draw 2 for free, obviously, but there are times when it's useful, 50 HP, but you do have resistant to fighting, so there are times when you can just leave this in the active and draw some cards. It's pretty underwhelming, but it's not terrible. And Gust 20 for 2, I mean, whatever. Then we get upgraded to Gust 30 for 2, but the ability Airmail, insane. Once doing a turn, and this ability we actually have in standard format right now on the Dracoloak. And Airmail says, once doing a turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put put one of them into your hand, put the other one onto the bottom of your deck. And that is really good because, I mean, pretty much every single deck in the game would love draw like this, every single theme deck in the format, and this was by far the best draw. There was another deck that played Pidgeotto actually as well, but Airmail was just really, really, really good. It allowed you to draw a lot of extra cards, and also assuming you aren't shuffling your deck, which you really aren't doing that much of the time, you got 2 copies of Cynthia, Tate Liza, 2 copies of Pokemon Fan Club, and 2 copies of Pokemon Communication, which will all shuffle your deck, but everything else doesn't shuffle your deck. None of the Pokemon shuffle your deck either. So you're not shuffling your deck most of the time. I mean, you can kind of control what's in your deck, what's on the bottom of your deck, which can be nice and give you a lot of advantages, especially if you're paying attention to that and you know what is being put on the bottom of your deck, and so you know what's on the to the top of your deck and stuff like that. But I mean, mostly just drawing 2 cards or drawing 1 card, but you look at 2 cards every single turn is really nice, and you don't need to lose any cards to use this either. I mean, discarding cards isn't a big deal. There isn't any way to discard either. You don't really want to discard, but you can't either. Then we do have Pidgeot as the last Pokemon in the deck. We have an attack. Well, we have 2 attacks. We have Free Retreat as well. Free Retreat is okay. Is it worth evolving your Pidgeotto to do this? No, but there are times when you'll use it in just weird scenarios. First of all, 130 HP. That's really solid. I mean, for a stage 2, it's not that good. But Dragonite, 160. But then the next highest HP is going to be the Pidgeot. And you can use Whirlwind, which is 60 for 2 colors and forces your opponent's active to switch to the bench. This is pretty awkward because the Pokemon you damage is now on the bench. And you don't have that strong. I mean, you have some spread-based attacks, but you don't really have any true snipe-based attacks that are able to just really target their bench. However, it is annoying for certain decks to deal with and can put you in a scenario to win the game, especially if your opponent doesn't have any switch cards in hand, which is why it is important to know how many switch cards people play. I have not played themed, since I migrated to Pokemon TCG Live, which was like 2 years ago or something. I don't remember quite how long ago it was, but it's been a while. But I used to know deck counts pretty well, and you can search the deck counts up pretty easily online as well, which is definitely something I'd do because it's helpful and easy to do. And so, you can punish your opponent if they, for some reason, just don't have a lot of Pokemon to play and have high HP, all their bench Pokemon are high retreat. And so that is an option, but it's not great. And then you have Spinstorm. This is a really interesting attack for 3 colors. Your opponent puts their active Pokemon, all cards attached to it, into their hand. This is pretty interesting because, then it takes the Pokemon out of play. But this is really risky. I mean, it's 3 energy on a stage 2, and it doesn't do any damage, right? So, you could be dealing a lot of damage probably some other way, but the big idea is if your opponent, say, you're in a Soaring Storm mirror, and your opponent goes and send up their Dragonite, but they don't have like a Dratini or Dragonair, specifically a Dragonair on the bench, and they don't have a lot of energy in play. You can go and Spin Storm, send it back to their hand, and then you can take a knockout. Hopefully two knockouts in this span where they're not really doing anything. Because if you just take a knockout, you could probably take a knockout anyways. But this is pretty disruptive, and also you can use this over and over again if your opponent only has a few Pokemon in play, and then just really mess with them. Technically, you could win the game with this. This is actually played in standard and control-based decks, along with Pidgeotto, but the big use was just in it was in these scenarios, but it was really good in some of those. Now let's talk a little bit about the trainers. I mentioned Pokemon Fan Club. Search for 2 basics and get them into your hand. Really nice for just setting up, and 2 cups of Pokemon Communication. Reveal a Pokemon from your hand, put it onto your deck, and then get another Pokemon from your deck, then put it into your hand. You essentially swap them, then you shuffle. Really solid. Essentially, at Pokemon Search for any Pokemon, this is one of my favorite cards. Honestly, ever. It's just a really fun card and a really solid card. I think a little underrated, but yeah, it's really good. A lot of theme decks didn't have this level of Pokemon Search. Some had something close to it, but no, it wasn't. It was pretty rare to have this level of Pokemon Search. It's not amazing. I mean, you'll certainly miss Pokemon you need, but through the use of like Alolan Grimer and then your other supporters, you should be able to get what you need. Those other supporters are pretty solid. You get Hau, draw 3, Bug Catcher, draw 2 on a coin flip, or 4, which is the same as some other supporter. I think it's actually they made a new supporter like this, but instead of draw 2 and on heads draw 2 more, it's draw 4, but on tails draw 2, which is kind of silly. That they just reworded it and it's a different card, and I don't remember what the card is, but yeah. Then Cynthia, shuffle draw 6. Cynthia is like really good. It's not as good in theme deck format because you do lose your hand, which can be an issue, and oftentimes you're going to have a big hand, so it's not necessarily going to be growing your hand all the time, but it's still a really good supporter, and a supporter every deck in the format would love to have, and it's not research, so you don't lose your hand. Research isn't like, I mean, it's pretty good in the decks it's in, but in this deck we have no Pokemon recovery, so Cynthia is really, really good. We do have energy recovery, though. We have energy recycle system. Put a basic energy from your discard into your hand, or 3 basic energies from your discard into your deck. It's like Rescue Stretcher, but for energies, it's pretty good, and will definitely come in clutch. You can use it for either use. It's not amazing usually, but it's all right. And Fisherman, put up. This is not. I thought he had all the right arts. This is the wrong Fisherman art. Put up to 4 basic, or sorry, put 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. It is not up to. I was wrong. But yeah, it's pretty nice, allowing you to just recover a lot of energies. It's just a simply good supporter for this deck because you need energies in your hand for Dragonite. And lastly, well, we got Lillie, draw till 6. Turn 1 going second. You can draw till 8, but that essentially will never happen. There was a rule change that relatively quickly after this deck came out in Unified Minds. So when Sword and Shield came out, then you couldn't play this card turn 1 going first, or any supporter turn 1 going first, meaning that this card was substantially nerfed, and I've almost never seen a turn 1 Lillie, and even if it is, it's rarely more than a draw 3, so it's just like how, but whatever. Lillie's pretty bad in the deck, to be honest, because you'll often have big hands, as I was saying with Cynthia, so you just won't draw any cards, but whatever. And then we get Tate Liza, shuffle draw 5, or it's a switch, pretty useful card. Especially as a switch, you do run 2 copies, but I mentioned Dragonite, High Retreat, Alolan Grimer, High Retreat, so overall, this deck, I mean, it was really good. Obviously, I said it was the best deck in format for 5 years. It actually might be closer to 4 years. It depends how you count it. You could even say 6 years, because it's probably still the best deck in format. The format just doesn't really exist anymore. Although, tell me down below if any of you play theme deck format anymore, because it's a pretty fun format. It just allows you to, I know it was really new player friendly, but also had a lot of depth as well. I mean, the format was just had no new decks. This was like the second to last year of new decks, and that was like 5 years ago. So yeah, so there was not too much change for quite a while, but things weren't really like fully optimized. I don't think. I mean, people are pretty close. I played just really really solidly by the end. I was like a really solid at the format because I played it a lot, and a lot of people I knew also were just really solid at the format. One of my favorite YouTubers, Mountain Spider, was just a theme deck YouTuber and did a lot of themed. But yeah, overall, just a really, really good deck. If you're interested in more theme deck stuff, though, I'd love to talk about it. I know, it's kind of a dead format, right? Really, every format except for standard is unfortunately a little dead. but because you can't play them on live, really. You could play this on live ladder. I don't know. I don't think I'll play this deck on ladder. It seems like it probably won't be so good against expanded decks like ADP and stuff. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.